those stories we're born into and the stories we were told have such a formative shaping of our life experience. And those stories become the stories we tell ourselves that shapes everything. Who I think I am and what I think I'm capable or not capable of. I'm the worst thing that ever happened to me. Those stories are highly limiting, or they are the jet fuel on a well-lived life, right? If we can discuss those stories, man, what a shape-shifting opportunity for us.
Understanding trauma, what it is, how it plays out in our lives, is a very important part of the self-improvement journey for men. And today we're very fortunate to get to learn from two really intelligent doctors, Dr. Jordan Peterson and Dr. John Delony. Now, when I found this video, I was blown away because I haven't found such a good explanation of what trauma is and how it affects guys' lives. So we'll watch a few clips and I'll share my thoughts along the way. I'm Sean. I run the men's groups over at mensgroup.com. I'm not a psychologist or a therapist or anything like that. I'm just an average guy that has had to work on himself for the last few decades. And I've also been running men's groups full-time for the last 15 years. And if you like what you see here, if you get value from this content, please hit the subscribe button below. This will ensure that you won't miss out on any useful content from Men's Group. And we'd appreciate the support. In Men's Group, what happens is guys want to talk about their porn addiction, their nice guy syndrome, saving their relationship, their addictions, or anything else that's on their mind. And what they often realize after talking with other guys who've been through similar things is that their issues actually originated in their childhood. Like me, I'm 40 now. I still have patterns playing out in my life that are causing suffering. Those childhood stories I still carry with me today.
Yeah, well, that idea about stories in some sense being stored in the body is kind of interesting. If you have had terrible things happen to you in the past, and that's pretty much true of everyone, your body computes the present danger of the environment based on how many things have happened to you that are terrible in the past that aren't resolved. And resolved would mean that you had generated a solution for them. If your psychophysiological system assumes that all the danger that you were subject to once is still present in the environment, then it's going to set you on edge as if you're walking in dangerous territory. What that means is that as far as your nervous system is concerned, and so as far as your body's concerned, that danger hasn't gone away. And what's happening is an unconscious alarm system that's looking for pitfalls and holes is warning you that the map that you're using is incomplete in a manner that might enable you to fall into the same hole.
It's kind of almost like a defect of the human body that if we didn't get a chance to think through and fully understand, process, or emotionally express in the moment when difficult things happen to us, then later on in life when we find ourselves in similar situations, the fears of those things happening again, they can get poked at by the current situation that's in front of us. And I can relate this so much because often there are times where I'm facing a situation that factually shouldn't be that upsetting, but I feel really upset about it, right? I have a disproportionately large response to a fairly normal situation. And what's happening there is it's not actually the thing that's right in front of me. It's that whatever situation I find myself in reminds me of these difficult things from the past. And for the things I found most difficult in my childhood or my young adulthood, I walk through the world almost on edge, almost on high alert, looking out for things that might be painful in a similar way. That's kind of like social anxiety, just something that I've felt. You know, walking into a foreign social environment like a party or a bar or something can feel disproportionately scary, given that nothing bad is likely to happen, and yet it feels like I'm already in danger before I've even walked into the place. For 25 years, I was just ignoring it. And that's what most guys do. It's uncomfortable, so we ignore it, we push it down, we run from it. But does that work?
Merely recontemplating it in the same manner over and over won't do it. And allowing it to plague you unconsciously, it'll do that forever until you solve it. It might show up in your dreams, it'll show up in your fantasies, it'll trigger you, so to speak, when you're talking to other people if they happen to discuss a topic that's related to it. And it's because that the narrative is one of failure and defeat. The event was one of failure and defeat. And if there isn't a map to allow you to transcend that, that's functional, then the part of your brain that is concerned with identifying danger is never going to let you go.
So what Dr. Peterson is saying here, if we run from these childhood stories, we're going to experience more dysfunction, more being triggered, more being irritable, more being angry, more being touchy in conversations, defensive, reactive. These things that we don't love of ourselves and we'd like to polish up will keep happening. Drama in relationships, conflicts, being a nice guy. These are all driven by childhood stories. And I see that very much in my own life. For a good 20 years, I just ignored them and pushed them away and used substances to get them away and stayed busy and pursued validation and sex and all these things just to avoid, run away from these childhood trauma stories. Let's see what Dr. John has to say about it.
If you continue to run from the memories instead of turning and facing these things and letting your body heal through relationships and other things in your life, the more you run, the more your body thinks it's winning. It's getting away from this stuff. So it actually reinforces the anxiety. It reinforces some of these psychological ailments the further you run from it. The only healing is through it.
And not only does this create a lot of mental and emotional suffering for ourselves, and because we're on high alert, looking out for situations that resemble painful things from the past, we end up being drawn to those situations and recreating those traumas. But what's worse is the effects that this ignoring of these childhood stories has on our bodies.
You're prepared for danger, and that does such things as burn up excess resources because you're much more reactive and on point than you might otherwise be in an anxiety-prone manner. It also suppresses immunological function because your body isn't that worried about long-term immunological health if you're confronting an emergency.
We're looking at the long-term data, man, and people are having strokes and cancer and heart attacks from childhood experiences. And that made me step back and go, whoa, there's these different layers to these stories happening all over the place. And it's not just narrative. It's the entire ecosystem that I call my body, right? My human experience.
Now, you might be feeling a little skeptical or resistant to this idea that childhood experiences, traumas will create these childhood stories that stick with us and affect our well-being and our energy levels and our immune system in the present. I was too. But these are both doctors who are pulling this information from a deep body of medical research. So the research studies now actually are showing children who experience traumatic events, and they don't have to be crazy events. It's just how the children perceived it. Because children don't have prefrontal cortexes, they're all emotions. And they're meaning-making machines, right? They touch the oven is hot and it burns them, but how they understand it is oven is bad or oven is scary. So when things happen to them, they think it's because of them, and they place all these meanings that don't exist. And that's how these stories are created. So whether you like it or not, the research is in. Childhood stories really do affect our current day decision-making, health, well-being, all of it. So then the question becomes, what do we do about it?
You talk about changing your past, owning your past, and it's useful to define that. You're likely to overcome a trauma, let's say, and no longer, in some sense, store it psychophysiologically if you've generated a causal story about the reason that the trauma emerged and then reconfigured the way that you're conducting your life so that the probability that a similar thing will happen to you is reduced to close to zero, right? It's not catharsis,
right.
It's understanding, yeah.
It's not catharsis, it's understanding. When I started looking into how to heal my traumas, to heal those childhood stories, I thought it was a process of catharsis, which is getting out the emotions that were unexpressed in those moments, because that's how our bodies work. If you found yourself in a difficult, dangerous situation, you got flooded with all these hormones, cortisol, stress hormones, to get you into fight or flight, to run away from that tiger. And if you didn't actually get to run and burn off some of that energy in the body, that can get trapped in your nervous system. And I thought that healing these past traumas was about that. It was about crying these things out, getting angry for things that you couldn't get angry for in the moment. So there is this aspect with healing trauma of getting those emotions out. But what Dr. Peterson is saying here is that it's not just that. You need to go back to those experiences and boldly stand up to them and parse through what you're responsible for, what you learned from it. It's how you perceived it as well. It's the meaning you placed on it. It's how those stories have affected your decision-making, how you communicate with people, how you relate to the world. the emotions you experience on a regular basis. Processing through all of that, I arrived at a place with some of those stories where they're not as intense anymore, because that little boy inside me now feels safer because adult Sean knows what to do to make it a lot less likely to end up in a similar painful situation. Since then, it's significantly decreased the intensity with which I'm triggered in situations where I used to be. That's the understanding that Jordan is talking about. And a question that often comes up for guys is, but I don't really remember a lot of stuff from my past, or memories aren't even that accurate.
By the way, we know that memory is a disastrous, narrative storyteller, right? So I care less about what actually happened and more, I'm in my 40s, I'm telling myself this story that happened. Can I tell that story? Can I relive that story? And my body doesn't take off on me, right? It doesn't rush to solve the problem for me because it knows I'm driving now, right?
The thing about memory is that it's not there to provide an accurate, objective record of the past, which is in fact impossible because the past is so unbelievably complex. It's more like a navigation tool, which is I went here, I fell into something terrible, and now I need to recalibrate the navigation map that I'm using so that I don't fall into the same hole.
This part resonated with me a lot because while investigating my childhood stories, my traumas, I couldn't get at some of the memories. There was no clear, specific memories a lot of the time. Like you see in the movies, somebody will be sitting there on the therapist's couch and the therapist is asking them questions about their childhood, and then all of a sudden, boom, this memory comes back that they didn't remember before. And that does happen because the brain's job is to head towards pleasure, conserve energy, keep us away from pain. And so to keep us away from that pain, it'll push down some of those memories to the unconscious. But in general, I haven't had many moments like that. Typically, these events are more of a flavor of emotions, being stuck or trapped or unable to say what I want to say in that moment, or feeling really low about myself. And there are loose memories that I have, but there are more clues that point me in a direction of what those childhood stories are. So you may not have any specific clear memories pop up, and that's okay. But I'm sure there's times in your life that you found difficult that felt a similar way as how you feel in these moments today when you get triggered, right? But then the question is, how do we actually heal these childhood stories?
One of the things that people can do that's very useful is if you have memories like that plague you, is to bring them to mind voluntarily instead of waiting for them to come after you involuntarily. And then to think through what has changed and what might not have, but also to come up with a plan so that if a similar circumstance arose, you'd be in a better position in one way or another to deal with it. There's no other way of getting the memory to go away.
There's no other way to get the memory to go away. There's no other way to get the symptoms that you don't like to go away than facing it, So that means for me, sitting with it in meditation, breathing in my body while intentionally trying to feel into those certain times in my life where I felt that same flavor of experience, when I was triggered in a similar way or whatever. Trying to think back to the first time I felt that way and really asking myself the hard questions around it and trying to keep breathing when uncomfortable feelings come up and letting them come out and journaling about it. This is a mind map I did over the course of 3 months. Anytime something would come up that was related to the symptom that I was upset with or the trauma story that I was trying to support or change, I just come into this book and I would write a new note, create a new branch, and then connect lines to how that relates to the other things. And then over 3-6 months, I've got this huge web of exactly what's happening. And that's really useful because I can take this to a men's group, I can take this to a therapist, and I have a full understanding of all the different ways this is playing out. And so this is what healing looks like. It's about trying to logically understand what happened, what your role was, how you can stop yourself from being in similar situations moving forward, reassuring yourself in the moment that things are different now. For example, I had a big business failure when I was a young man. So now, when there's some bad news, I have this disproportionately large response, right? I get fight, flight, freeze. I don't even want to look at it. I get super anxious. I can't sleep. I start stressing. I start losing my hair. And so it's this process of having to talk myself back from that cliff. Hey, Sean, it's okay. Things are different now. You have a great team of advisors around you now, supportive friends that are entrepreneurs. You have more money in the bank now. You have a supportive partner now. You know, this business is way more stable than that past business. You didn't take on a ton of debt like in that first business. The only reason why I'm able to support myself in that way in the moment when I'm triggered is because I did the hard work in the journal with a therapist, with a men's group, understand what that little boy is upset about in these moments when I'm triggered and what he needs to hear. So I hope this inspires you to take a good look at your childhood trauma stories. If you want to talk about them with people, we've got thousands of great guys talking about this exact kind of thing all day, every day over at mensgroup.com. And if you found this video useful, please subscribe. We'd love to have you be a part of the Men's Group movement. And if you made it this far, I bet you're going to like one of these next videos.